What's going on, guys? IFBB Pro John DeRosa here. I'm here with my good friend Dustin.
I'm Dustin Elliott. I'm a senior brand manager and product formulator.
We are bringing you a brand new series where we will be talking about bodybuilding, sports nutrition, and training.
And industry trends as well. Check it out. All right, guys, episode 1 coming up. We're going to talk about the ketogenic diet. We're going to talk about intermittent fasting. And as always, we're going to discuss the science portion of it versus how it translates into reality. All right, guys, so before we get into things, what I wanted to do is get a quick little recap of John's season, at least so far, to be continued, and get a feel for how it went. So going into the New York Pro, the crowd obviously there thought you were the fan favorite, came in second, and then you had another great showing at the Toronto Pro the following week. Just fell short of Johnny Jackson, a big veteran in the sport. How do you feel about the way you opened up the season and how it's gone so far?
Well, I mean, obviously I have had a tremendous season. I don't take anything away from, the champions that I've lost to. Of course, we train to win, and I feel like, although I didn't win, I've learned a lot, and it was a successful season for me. I think that I bought a better package than I have in the previous years. I'm continuing to improve as an athlete. I'm continuing to learn, and the sky's the limit. We're just getting started here. We may be continuing on the season. We may be shutting it down. Things remain to be seen, but so far I'm really, really happy with the way things have gone.
Awesome. Sounds great. So with that being said, I guess the first thing that we want to get into, since the subject for this episode is about dieting, is your diet in particular. There's a lot of talk going on with some of the latest diet trends, some of the science going into it, what are the best ways to actually lose fat. And in this industry, in sports, nobody gets more appealed than a bodybuilder. So tell us about what your diet was for the New York Pro.
So I did a lot of carb cycling for the New York Pro. Obviously, it's been around for years, carb cycling. There were moments where I hit ketogenic numbers as far as diet, carbohydrates. But for the most part, my carbohydrates are pretty moderate. Had moments where I was on none for, a few days at a time. And, for the most part, it was a pretty steady decrease in calories through each week. Wasn't anything extreme. I think that's the biggest thing that most people should take away from this, is that you don't need to cut all your calories, all your carbohydrates, all your fats to lose weight safely and efficiently. I think doing it steadily throughout the weeks is probably a better approach, and that's how I did it for my prep this year. Again, I didn't have any coaches. I did it on my own, so it took a lot of meticulous, writing everything down, paying close attention to what was happening with my weight and my body. But again, I think it was probably the best approach for me.
Okay, great. And I think there's a lot of confusion for people who are familiar with carb cycling, or even for those who aren't. Obviously, it's going through a series of a few days, usually 2 to 3 for most people.
Yeah, it was about 3 days at the most.
Okay, and then you would have a day where you would essentially reintroduce carbohydrates on the 4th day. So for a lot of people, I think where some of the confusion in the bro science stems from is people feel like they have an unlimited calorie count when they go through carb cycling. And obviously, as you addressed here, there is a target calorie count for when you are carb cycling.
Right.
And I think another issue is that when you do have these refeed days, the two questions are, how much carbohydrates should you have, and what kinds of carbohydrates should you have? Is there anything you could speak on in regards to that?
So I know a lot of people do, when they do their refeed days, they go crazy and just eat everything and anything you put in front of them. I tried to have the same foods that I was having throughout my diet. So for the most part, I was dieting with white rice, potatoes, and oats. And that's what I would do on my refeed days. I would just have a little bit more of them. So let's say on a low carbohydrate day, I was only having 50 grams of carbs through oatmeal. Let's say on my high refeed day, I would do 50 grams of oats on my high refeed day, but I would introduce another 50 grams of carbohydrates from white rice or potatoes, something like that, and do that several times throughout the day. So where on a low carb or no carb day, I'm having 0 grams of carbs. On a high carb day, I'm about 300, 350.
Okay. Yeah. That pretty much clears it up for us. And then as you mentioned also about when it came to coaches. Obviously, you've had experience with coaches before. Obviously, without naming any coaches in particular, how do you feel about what it was like for you when you had a coach who kept watch over your calorie count and over your diet? Did you like that versus doing it on your own? And if you want to speak to that.
So there's a lot of I think misunderstanding when it comes to why I decided to diet on my own this time. A lot of people feel like, well, you look good with this guy, why don't you stick with him? And I think what we have to do as athletes is take a little bit more responsibility for the way we look and what kind of package we're presenting on stage. Sometimes when you have a coach, I'm a very coachable person from when I was a young kid playing, pee-wee football and stuff on basketball. If a coach tells me to run 2 miles, I'm going to go run 2 miles. That's just what I do, whether I felt good or not, or whether I felt it was the right thing to do or not. So sometimes having a coach, the coach will tell you, hey, John, go out and have, 150 grams of carbs today.
Yeah.
And maybe I felt like, maybe I still can push a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't need those 150 grams of carbs today. But you do it anyways because your coach is telling you to do that.
Yeah.
When maybe you can still push a little bit more, maybe get a little bit harder. And vice versa. Maybe sometimes they'll push you the other way too much and say, you know what, go another 3 days without any carbs.
Yeah.
When you're not feeling it. And that might have an adverse reaction on your physique as well. So that was my biggest takeaway. During this prep, I was able to really be in tune with my body and feel what I needed to give it to get better.
Gotcha. And obviously that mostly comes with experience. So it's not a recommendation for somebody if it's your first or second time out, but for somebody at your experience level, obviously you had plenty of experience with a coach, without a coach, so you felt comfortable in how your body responded to certain things.
Right.
So that makes sense. For a lot of people, the other big issue, especially whether you're with or without a coach, is peak week. So, even for whether you're getting ready for a bodybuilding contest or whether, like myself, you're getting ready for vacation or something like that, what are some of the tips or some of the pitfalls you feel of peak week when it comes to essentially you want to carb up to get ready for said event or said vacation, but how should you go about it?
So one of the things, I'm not as well educated as, let's say, Dustin in the area, but I did have some schooling in, biochemistry, biology, stuff like that, and I did go to school for nursing, so I have a little bit of a background in it. But one thing I can say for sure, for certain, is that your body is an incredibly smart organism and is always going to be a step ahead of you. So I think the best approach for peak week, or I don't even like to call it peak week anymore, because I think it implies that you have to do something different to look your best. And I think that the best approach is, if you can continue doing what you're doing, you're looking good, the best approach is not to do anything different, not to do any extremes. So there's a lot of there's a lot of bad ideas out there that people want to cut sodium, increase sodium, cut your water. If you look good drinking a gallon of water, it's probably best you keep drinking that gallon of water.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion on it. There wasn't any crazy things that I did this year for peaking for any of my shows. Did I manipulate my water a little bit going into the show? Maybe the night before I cut my water at 7-8 o'clock. That's it. But I wasn't depleting and cutting water and sodium for 2 or 3 days leading into the show. I think it's just not a good approach. I think you're going to end up ruining the look that you want to present, whether on vacation or on stage or whatever event you're going to. I think the best approach is just keep following the plan.
Yeah. And then on my side, the strength and conditioning side of it, some of the issues you run into is, again, speaking to exactly what you just spoke to, athletes wanting to change on contest day, whether it be a sport or bodybuilding and competing on stage. They want to change and they want to do something different than they've always done, and they want to take outside opinions versus what they've always done and how they've always looked. If you look at the way the industry is trending today, Going forward in the industry, you have a lot of DNA testing, blood-based testing, to find out exactly what works for athletes and what works best from them. And the reason why that goes on is because everybody's different. Everybody responds to something different. Right. And from my standpoint, the strength and conditioning side, on the outside of the industry, looking in, a lot of the things that I hear is about coaches who have created this cookie-cutter formula to what they feel works, maybe even based on just what worked for them. And what ends up happening is that you go to this coach for a training guide or for peaking, and they're just copy and pasting what they did based on what you're doing, and maybe they change it based on body weight.
Right.
So I think a lot of what you do on peak week, at least from my side of the argument, has a lot to do with experience, what you've done in the past. And John, maybe you could speak to this. Would you even say you play with your carb up days to see what works for you and what doesn't, like while you're early in your diet versus
absolutely
later?
Absolutely. And that's what I was getting at earlier, is that when I would have my higher carb days, I wasn't going out and shoving pizza in my face and bagels, and the carbohydrates that I was having were the carbohydrates that I was having throughout my diet, just in a little bit larger amounts. So that way you can kind of see what's going to happen when you're going to carb up. I mean, I think it's a little bit, I think you're taking a little bit of a risk when you're used to eating, and again, this is just my opinion, there's no scientific reasoning for it, just from what I've experienced, you get a little bit of a different response when you're used to having, again, white rice, or let's say white potatoes, and then you just completely go out of that. You haven't had pizza in weeks, and you just start slamming pizza in your face. You're gonna your body's gonna look a little bit different because it's not used to breaking down those kinds of carbohydrates as opposed to rice. And then again, the fats and oils and everything else that you're putting into your body that's literally a foreign substance at that point. You might have a little bit different response. So I tend to play it safe. I know that I've had white rice. I know how my body's gonna respond when I have white rice. So I just increase it a little bit, see what happens. And just keep adjusting it little by little like that. Yeah,
and then if you want a little bit of the science side of it, when you are looking at different carbohydrate sources, typically they come with different proteins and different enzymes. So for example, the most common one that we're all familiar with is gluten, right? And if you're not, if you don't have a gluten allergy, then there's nothing wrong with, breads and things that contain gluten for the most part. People are running scared from gluten, and they don't necessarily need to be. Right. But here's the twist to it, especially for athletes. There are certain people where they may not necessarily have a full-blown allergy to something, but they respond to it differently. Some people with bread, they tend to hold more water.
Right.
The way your body processes some of the proteins and enzymes in these carbohydrate sources, it may process it a little bit different.
Right.
So your body's in a very sensitive state when you're cutting calories. It responds almost like a knee-jerk reaction to when you take in carbohydrates after you've been cutting them for so long. Mm-hmm. So the science portion, to John's point, is that yes, different carbohydrate sources will cause your body to respond differently.
Right.
So if you're going to be carbing up for a show or carbing up for an athletic event, you shouldn't do something different than what you've always done unless you've experimented with it during your prep or during practice. And so it comes back to sport once again. If you haven't done it in practice, don't try it in the game.
There you go. So there you go. You guys are gonna get plenty of that during this series. I just learned something that's pretty damn cool. But again, I knew that as I applied that in real life, I just never understood, again, the enzymes and everything that it takes to for your body to break it down, and the water retention that might come with it. All the it's actually pretty damn cool to sit here and learn that as well.
All right, guys, so the next discussion topic we're going to get into, as promised, is keto and the ketogenic diets. So with keto, John, as you mentioned earlier, you were talking about the carbohydrates during some of your low-carb phases were almost keto-like.
Right.
And so intermittent fasting also incorporates the use of ketones as well. So for everyone who doesn't know, when a bodybuilder does cut carbs, the reason they do it is so that they can have their body revert to fat as a preferred fuel source.
Right.
Now, one of the forgotten energy sources, obviously we have protein, we have carbs, we have fats, but it's the conversion of fats to ketones that are actively used by the body and the brain as an energy source.
Right.
And so this thought process has caused the dawn of some of these ketogenic diets. We always had the low carb diets in the past, and now it's been converting to the ketogenic diets. Now, the reason why diets like these tend to work if you think about it, the going hypothesis on my end, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, is that our ancestors were hunter-gatherers.
Right.
So they went extended periods of time without being able to eat. They would spend a lot of their time, a lot of their energy preparing their shelter, hunting for food, gathering food, and so their meal structure was a lot different than what we have today. People tend to forget that this breakfast, lunch, and dinner thing that we do, it was created by society. And so, we're eating constantly versus maybe how our ancestors ate.
Right.
And so going into ketosis is something that our body has adapted to, and it's been showing in research where our brain has actually been shown to function better in ketosis. The average American will have a really big lunch and they'll be ready to fall asleep afterward because of the carbohydrates.
Right.
Whereas your brain, when it's using ketones as a fuel source, is actually functioning better. And so it's ironic because when you look at the history of human beings, you see different religions and different cultures where they fast to pray and they fast to to focus and to read. And it may sound strange to us today, like how could you possibly go hungry and focus on your religion? Well, what we didn't know then that we do know now is that when you go into a ketogenic state, they actually are in a better state to meditate or to focus on scripture or whatever it is that they were doing within their culture, their religion. So it's kind of some of the things that our ancestors have been doing. We're just now catching on to the science behind it. And from the science of ketones, you have the ketone diet that was born, and now intermittent fasting. So guys, what we're going to do is in video 2, we're actually going to get into John's side of what he's experienced in diets. We're going to get into more of the science behind intermittent fasting and some practical ways in which you can do it. So for example, ketogenic diets are built off of the science. For a lot of people, it may not be practical. For a lot of athletes, it may not be even ideal for their goals. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what worked for you, John, versus what the science may be, some of the hang-ups of some of these diets, and some practical ways you can actually apply it to your life, whether it just be daily or whether it be dieting for a show.
Right.
So stay tuned for episode 2.
All right, guys.